Hi, the next step for these boxes was the little wooden hinge. And I decided, I normally cut these on the table saw, and I cut these finger joints, basically, or a box joint. It's a pretty accurate little joint. It takes a pretty precise setup to get them right. Now, like I say, I've done them on the table saw before, but this time I've decided to use my Leigh D4 jig, dovetailing jig, and they tell you that you can not only cut dovetails with these, but you can also cut a box joint by kind of using the tool as though it's not the way it wasn't designed. So what they have you do is we size the material first, get it to a certain width so that the spacing comes out right, and then they have you make up these spacer blocks. There's 3/4 inch spacer blocks, and that thickness is critical. It has to be 250 thousandths is what it has to be. So you take 3 of those. So the way this goes then is I have a long piece of board and I just flip it end for end, actually end for end, and just keep whittling them off. So I start off, I put it in the jig without a spacer against the stop. It goes up against these stops and up against the fingers when we clamp it in place. And I take my router and I follow these little cutouts in here. That gives me my spacing, and that's a very precise setup here too. There's a lot of fiddling around to get these set just right. So here goes. Gonna get noisy. That's the first step. Now we need to move that over 2 thicknesses of 1/4 inch or a half. So these have double-faced tape on the back of these little sticks. You put those up against the stop, push those down against the jig. That moves the stop over a 1/2 inch. And we put our board back in and we cut it at this setting. Now this end of that hinge is done. So now what we do is we flip it end for end. We keep this same edge against the stop, and we need the other spacer now to start the other end of the hinge. So we start off with a 1/4 inch. We put the 1/4 inch against the stop. We put our hinge in, or our piece of material in the right way up against the same datum. Lock it in place. We're going to cut this one now. Now we're almost done now. Now we need to move it over another 1/2 inch. So we add these two steps blocks in. So we've moved it over 3/4 inch now total. We put our wood back in. Same datum up against that stop. Clamp it in place. We take one cut. So there's our hinge. It's finished, but it's on either end of the board. So if you follow me, we come over here to the table saw. I'm sorry, the radial saw. I have a saw step set, a stop set for the right length of the hinge. Fingers are close. Here's one end of it. Flip it. Here's the other end. Now we get to check our fit. So we have our marks here. It tells me which way it goes. The arrows go to the same. It just goes in. That's the start of our hinge. So what I do is I blank all these off. You can see I have several going for the number of boxes I have. So it takes a pair for each box. And then the next step is I'll have to radius these edges off, make this round so that it'll turn. And then once I get that done, I put it in a drill jig and put it up against the stop, and I drill for the hinge pin that goes down through the board. And that's critical too, because I have to get it perfectly centered as I flip it over, because I meet in the middle. That's a hinge, the start of it. Thanks.